Hey everybody, Lawrence here with Dirty Basic Terrain coming at you with another one. Not too long ago, I was doing some crafting and had YouTube on for background noise, and of course autoplay was on, and up came a video from Dungeon Dad, part of his Monster of the Week series, and I heard Web Golem, and that actually got my attention. I stopped crafting for a moment and actually watched a video about this Web Golem, and I was like, okay, yeah, I got to make one of these things. This is just cool. But I decided, and with this challenge that I'm currently doing, I was like, I got to work this into this Lair challenge somehow. So I made a pair of web golems. I'm actually pretty happy with how they turned out. And I can't wait to get them onto the table to terrorize my players. Let me walk you through how I did it. But before we get to that, I want to give a big thank you to my patrons, Dungeon Matron, Corel, Mia Geek, and Psych. Yeah, your guys' monthly help is greatly appreciated, and it makes doing this, it encourages me to keep on making these videos. I can't thank you enough. All right, everyone, let's get to it. To get started here, I'm just taking some off-cut pieces of foam that I have in my scrap bin, and got to cut the feet. I mean, as you can see off to the left there, I've already done the first golem's feet, but I'm just trying to get it to where they actually fit the base here. I think it's like 3.75 inches wide, but I'm going for like a split foot pincer like look to it, spider-esque, I guess you could say. But it's just a matter of trimming away small shavings and just shave small bits off at a time. As always, you don't want to shave off large chunks, at least not when you're getting down to shaping, because you could cut too much off. It's always better to shave small pieces off. Yeah, it makes a bigger mess, but in the end, it's just a safer way of actually carving foam, at least for something like this. Shave off till you get to the form you're happy with, and then you have feet. Now from here on out, the process is going to be almost identical to how I did the crystal and golems and the earth elementals. I'm just shaving down the lower parts of the legs right now, getting to a point where I like, and I'm just going to hot glue them to the feet and put them in place. Now, the lower part of the legs I thought were a little bit too long, so I'm just going to shave them down a little bit shorter, and I'm also kind of blending them in so they actually work into the feet without, too much. I'm trying to get it so I won't have to fix things later. And now I'm just kind of cutting down shorter. And of course, the upper part of the thigh part of the legs, I'm doing the same thing as I did with the shin or lower half of the legs, and just shaving down this piece of foam that it will match up, and then I will hot glue it in place. It's same as the lower half of the leg. Now I'm taking another piece of, chunk of foam out of the offcut bin, and I'm going to make the body. And again, as you can see, I've already done a body for the first one, as a test run. But this is just basically shaving it down small piece by piece, and do a test fitting on the legs. I'm going to trim the legs a little bit so it'll fit better. And just keep trimming away in small pieces. Yeah, again, yes, I'm making a big mess, as you can see. But
I would still make it's easier to clean up the mess than to have to do the whole process over again because I cut too much off. But again, I'm just shaping it until I get the rough form of the torso to the point where I like it. Cut out the shoulder blades, the chest, the stomach, everything. And, of course, the shoulders. And then eventually I will hot glue it to the legs. I mean, it can be a bit of a pain, but overall it's not all that hard or complicated to do. See? Hot glue, stick it together, hold it for a few seconds, and boom, you have legs and a torso. Now that I've got the legs and torso together, I'm going to start trimming down the legs a little bit and just make them blend a little more better together from the torso to the legs. I left a lot of excess on that deciding that I just didn't like how it was looking. So again, I'll trim away small bits and pieces until it gets to the point where I like. And again, this just proves my point. Trim away small bits, and because if there's too much there, you can always trim away more. But once you trim it away, it's a pain in the butt to try and fix. So just trim away small bits till it gets to the point where you're happy. To be blunt, this substructure that I'm making for this golem is not quite as critical. It doesn't need to look like super good. It still needs to look good, but it doesn't have to be perfect because eventually this thing's going to be completely covered up anyway. So, and now of course we need to give this monster some arms. Again, I mean, I have a lot of offcuts of foam, so I'm just trimming down a piece in the same exact manner as the legs for the upper half of the arm, and then I'll trim it down to where it's the point where I'm happy with how thick it is and whatnot, and then I will hot glue it in place. It's exactly in the same manner I did in the legs, except I'm going from the torso away instead of from the bottom up. Now, while I cut the upper half of the arms, I also cut pieces for the lower half of the arms because it was the exact same process as far as shaving it down. But I actually want to give them a little bit of pose or make it look a little more interesting. So I cut the lower half and the upper half at angles where they're going to connect, just so they're not so static looking. And of course, I want to give something for the hands. And basically for this, I'm just cutting almost like a ball for the fist. But I'm not actually going to carve anything special for it. I just need something that I'm going to attach something to later for fingers. But again, this is just basically getting it down to a point where it looks like a ball. And I am going to attach it to the lower half of the arm. And for the final major body part, the head. For these, I decided to go with like an oblong shape. I don't know why, it just seemed appropriate. But that's what I wanted to do. So I just basically cut out a rough shape, oblong, till it gets to the point where I'm happy with it. Do a couple test fits on the body. And basically go back and forth until I'm happy with how it looks. And once again, you can see I'm making a big mess by shaving off small bits. I know I keep harping on shaving off small bits, but it makes sense because I've done it where I've shaved off big chunks, and I have totally ruined builds that way. Again, I'm happy with how it looks. Put a spot of hot glue on, attach it. There, major body. The body is done. Now I have this bird skeleton that I got from the Dollar Tree a couple years ago. I decided to actually cut a bunch of it apart to use as bits for this build. I decided I wanted to actually have some spines, or I don't know what you want to call them, basically spines coming out of the back of the head, because I thought it would look cool. But again, I'll just cut part of these tailbones off and then just kind of push them in and then pull them back out, put a spot of hot glue, and then jam them back in so they'll be permanently attached. Pretty simple, and I was actually happy with it. So, And the same as I did with the head spines, I'm going to cut pieces off of the bird, and I want to make finger claws, I guess you could call them. Or basically, I need fingers for the hand. I'm going to basically cut little small slits, and then I'm going to jam the bones that I cut off the bird into the spot, and then pull them back out, put a spot of hot glue on, and then jam it back into where it was originally. I am using a X-Acto blade just to actually make a slit to where the fingers are going to go, just to make it easier, because I want to be a little bit more precise than what the head spikes were. Make the slit, jam in the bone, widen it open some, put a spot of hot glue, or pull it back out, put a spot of hot glue, jam it back in, and it's attached. Again, making these finger claws was pretty simple. Cut a piece off a bird, jam it in, glue it. Done. I had a couple pieces left over from when I cut bits off the bird, and I was like, shoulder spikes. Literally, that's how I decided to put these spikes in the shoulders. I had leftover bits, and I wanted to use them, so the same as all the other pieces. Jam the piece in, pull it out, put a spot of hot glue in, put it back in. Now, for some reason, I just wanted this to have a spine. And I had these little plastic dinosaurs that I got from, or dinosaur skeletons that I got from Temu. So I cut one of the tails off, made a little impression, a little slice in the back, widened it open a little bit more with a pencil, put a line of hot glue in, and then stuck the tail in to look like a spine. And it actually worked out pretty good. I wanted to give these things a visual representation of some fangs, so I made a mouth here with a knife and then open it up a little bit. But for the fangs themselves, I'm just using cut off tips of toothpicks. It's pretty simple, quick, and easy. I use an additional toothpick to actually jam into the mouth where the fangs are going to go to give it the fangs a path to sit. I'm going to put the blunt ends of the fangs into some PVA and then jam them up into where I had made the guide holes in. And that's it. That's pretty easy, and now they have fangs. Well, these things, at least all the artwork I've seen for them, have eyes. 8 of them. So I have these little foam balls I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm slicing 4 of them in half. 8 eyes. Pretty simple. I'm going to take some PVA and brush it onto the face there. I'm not going to try and glue each individual eye. I'm just slathering glue all over the place. And then with some tweezers, I'm going to place each individual half-cut eye on. A pretty simple way to do it. I want to give the base a little bit of visual interest, so I'm using some pine bark nuggets, and I'm going to be cutting them in half at an angle, so they'll appear to be jutting out of the ground at an angle. I'm doing that, like I said, just so the base has a little bit of pop to it. I don't want an absolutely plain base or just purely sand base, but I've seen bases that were just, there was nothing to them, and it kind of took away from the mini itself, even though the mini is the star and not the base. But again, these will look like rocks sticking up out of the ground once they're all painted up. A little bit of hot glue and stick them in place, and they're done. And it just gives the base a little bit of extra something. Now I'm going to use this texture paste just to blend in certain areas so it smooths it into the body a little bit better, like at the base of the claws, around the spine, anywhere there's big gaps that might cause some weakness in the model itself later. Again, you could probably skip this part, but I'm doing it because I'm just weird. No, but I really do want the claws and stuff, just to blend in a little bit better. And like I said, there are places where there are massive gaps, and I want to fill them in, and it'll strengthen the model overall. Well, I am doing a desert theme with this one as far as the base goes, so I'm just brushing down a bunch of PVA real quick, and then I am going to dump some mortar or construction sand that I have. It's called construction sand because it has various sizes of grit inside of it, small chunks of rock and not just pure sand. So it'll give it some more visual interest. Now, I've already primered and given them a zenithal highlight, but now I'm actually going to start adding color to this, and I'm going to paint this up in the same manner that I painted up the Lair build, because these things are, for the challenges, actually meant to go with the Lair. For the stones, I'm actually using a true ochre and a mid-tone brown mixture, just to make them a little bit different, more visually different than the sand itself that's on the base. But again, this is just a base coat. Now for the model itself, I'm actually going to be giving it a dark blue-gray base coat. Basically the whole thing except for like maybe the eyes and the spines. The body itself is going to be getting this dark blue color as a base coat. I'm trying as best as I can for 100% coverage. Now I'm actually going to give the body itself a mid-tone. Basically, I'm doing an overbrush, like 85% coverage of a mid-tone gray. I'm using pewter gray, if that matters to anybody, but you can use your own choice. Again, I'm just leaving all the deep recesses alone. Do a quick mid-tone or overbrush of the entire thing. And now I'm going to be doing a quick highlight dry brush using a light gray. For this one, I'm using a granite gray from Apple Barrel. But again, this is just a highlight dry brush, and pretty quick, pretty simple. Now I actually want to start painting the sand itself. I'm actually going to be using a straight true ochre color, no mix. And this will actually make it, and at the end it'll make a difference between the sand and the stone itself. So again, this is just 100% coverage on all the sand with a straight true ochre color. Now, still using the true ochre color, I'm actually going to give the rocks that had the true ochre brown mix an overbrush with the true ochre, just to bring it up and make it somewhat blend in with the sand, while still because of the base coat, allowing them to be distinctly different. Now I'm actually going to give the stones and the sand a quick highlight dry brush with a desert sand color. Yeah, go believe I'm using desert sand paint to make sand. Yeah. But again, this is just a quick light dry brush over all the sand and the stones themselves. And this will make everything blend in together and give it the highlights and that sandy look to it. Now, I forgot to hit record on the previous step, but the previous step was just me airbrushing a dark brown wash onto the body and to the base. Just to dirty and dingy it up some. And now I'm giving a quick highlight dry brush of the light gray to the bodies of the web golems. And the same as the bodies of the web golems themselves, I'm using the desert sand color again, just to give a highlight dry brush to the rocks and to the sand again. Just to bring up all the edges and cracks and crevices and just make it pop a little bit more. Now I actually want to start painting the eyes, and I'm using Vallejo Express color Black Lotus, which is basically an all but black purple. And I actually checked out several images of different species of spiders, and they all have black eyes. So there might be some out there with different colors, but this web golem is going to have black eyes. So I'm using the Express color and painting each of the individual eyes the Black Lotus. And now for all the spikes and claws, I'm using Army Painter Speed Paint Occultist Cloak. It seemed to be the right color. I said I do not put that much thought into when I pick my colors. Like, yeah, that one. So that's about how much process. But it seemed to be the right color to use, and all the claws and the spikes got the Occultist Cloak. I wanted the eyes to actually have a gloss to them, so I just grabbed some Mod Podge gloss and coated each of the eyes with that. And I also did the fangs to the mouth. Again, I wanted them to shine. Okay, now I'm actually going to start covering a lot of the work I've done up, so you won't really be able to see it. I'm using my stretched out dryer web technique to add spider webs to this. I'm using small pieces of the sheets and then wrapping around whatever section, and then I'm kind of like painting it in place with some watered down PVA. The watered down PVA will actually dry clear, so you won't be able to see it, and it'll hold the webs in place. I'll be completely honest with you, this turned out to be a bit of a pain in the butt to do. I think I made a few sailors' ears bleed while I was doing this. But it's trying to work around all the spikes and the claws and trying to, while having the face have webs on it, not completely cover up the eyes. In the end, it was absolutely worth it. But if you try this, you will be swearing a lot. But again, this was absolutely worth it to do it in the end, I think. But it is tedious and at some parts a little bit frustrating to do. I'm not going to lie to you about that. While I was waiting on the glue to dry for the webs, I decided to actually add some pigment powders to the rocks and the base itself. Basically anywhere I thought it would look good. This is just a dark brown pigment powder that I made. And using some cheap makeup brushes, brush it on anywhere it looks good. Once I'm done that process, give it a quick spritz with some isopropyl alcohol to set it in place so it won't rub off. Now, for the webs themselves, they are very delicate and very weak and will very easily tear away. So I'm using an airbrush with some watered down matte sealer, and I'm just hosing down the webs themselves. This will add some strength to the webs and will also adhere them all together, and will actually make it stick to the golem itself even better. So this is just a precautionary step. Now that everything was dry, I was looking at it and I was this just ain't working. You know, and I was getting frustrated at that point. I was like, I gotta add some shading. Originally I was actually going to use my airbrush. Then I said, I want to try the pigment powders, see how that works out. So I actually, using the soft pastel chalk technique, I mixed up a batch of some really dark blue pigment powder, and I just started adding it to the one. I was like, this is going to work. So anywhere that I thought would need shading, or shadows, or even dirt, the pigment powders actually start working. Now, after you dip it into your pigment powders, it helps to actually knock a little bit of it off, because if you don't, it'll just look like a solid blob of whatever color you're trying to put on, which I did do a few times, so I had to blow as much excess off as I could. But again, this worked really well, and I was really happy with it. Now, for the base, I've already glued on some spiders I had left over from the previous project. And I was like, let's add some desert grass tufts just to make it pop. And before I forget, I did actually spray all the pigment powders with some isopropyl alcohol. And here it is, all said and done. The monsters are in their lairs, and the party's world is about to go to... I'm actually really happy with how these turned out. Throughout the process, I wasn't honestly sure. And until the very end, when I added the pigment powders, I was like, oh, this is not good, this is not good, this is not good. This is most definitely a trust the process build. And I am really happy with how they look.
Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched to the end, and as always, I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe. If you guys want to try and want to build one of these things, take some pics and come to the Discord and post pictures of your build, or even the work in process builds. I would love to see what you guys come up with. Again, guys, I really enjoyed this. This Lair challenge was actually really fun to do, and like I said, I love doing challenges and not contests, because challenges it encourage you to take a concept of a simple idea and then just make it your own. And you're not competing. You're not competing against others to say mine's better than yours. Just no, it's like, hey, this is what I did, versus other people say, hey, this is what I did, and we all just kind of check stuff out. So check out at Carl's page, and he hosts a challenge like every month or two, and they're really fun to do because the challenges will stretch your imagination, and they are really fun. So if it hadn't been for the challenge, I would not have made this series of Lair videos, and I'm glad I took part in it. Well, as always, guys, remember, when you're making your terrain or monsters, remember, the only person you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain.